Hi, and welcome to our assignment explanation lecture. So, honestly, because this is an online class, I know it can be really challenging sometimes to complete some of the assignments when you don't really know what the expectation is. You get a rubric, but that's kind of all you have. And so, what I wanted to do was do a brief presentation for all of you on the expectations for the big end of the semester. It's due at the end of the semester mostly, assignment that is our manual. So there's all different manuals, and you'll notice that each group has been assigned to a manual topic. So what I wanted to do today is just briefly talk to you about what the expectation is and then show you a few examples so you can see what they look like. Now, I am on campus often at UNC, so if you do find yourself on campus, if you have other classes on campus, and you want to step into my office and take a look at the manual, I am going to be leaving these as examples up front with the school special education secretaries. Our administrative assistants, Tess, will have these as a stack, and if you want to look at any of them, you are welcome to look at them while you're there and then just go ahead and put them back. So I will have these available for you to view as well. One thing I want to point out before I get started giving you some examples is each group has their own topic and each topic has its own rubric. So please remember that as I go through these examples, every one of them is different. So for example, this is it's a little glary here, but this is the IEP for parents. Now you'll notice it is bound and all that. That is not an expectation because you are in an online class. And so although you can do that if you want and leave it for me on campus, that's not required. You can also just honestly make it as a PDF because I'd like everyone to share their manuals with the rest of the class. So at the end of the semester, you'll have everybody's manual that hopefully you can keep for yourself and maybe use when you're out there as a teacher and or as an educator in whatever way you are. So that being said, Word documents can be turned into PDFs, and that is just as good. You can embed images and all that without actually printing it. Okay, so let's look at the first one, which is the IEP process for parents. And this is what it looks like for this group. This is just an example. I've seen them all different ways. I've seen them in notebooks as well. They happen to bound them. So if you look at your rubric, you'll see in the left-hand column you have different criteria. I'm looking over there because that's where it's on my computer. And the different criteria explaining how the eligibility process works, explaining what it means to be in special education, etc. So I'm not going to go through every aspect of the rubric for each group because you'll have it, but I do want to just show you what each group one look like. Now, if you're not in the IEP for parents, feel free to fast forward until you see me pick up your group's one. So this is kind of like, your personal guide to special ed. Any and all should have a table of contents. So you'll see there's a table of contents right here that describes all the different components that are in this notebook. So it starts with a letter to parents. It talks about special education and how it's changed over the years, what IDEA is, definitions and abbreviations. So here's where you've got some specific information. So I just want you to see that, it's not meant to be a ton of writing, but there's a lot of visuals as well. So remember, this is a manual, and the idea is that you keep this and use this as an educator. This is not busy work. It's something meant to help you. So finding images on Google Images is probably a great way to help you. This is kind of like, what is IDEA? So they talk about, what FAPE is, what LRE is. Basically, these are all the principles of IDEA, the 6 principles, and what each one means. And then this is an acronym page, which I think every family should have in their own manual. And so that might include, what ADA means, what IDEA means, what FAPE means, what, IEP means, etc. So all these acronyms are right here. Some disability category information. And this is one of your components that's in your rubric. How does the eligibility process work? And it's in parent-friendly language, so it's easy to understand and implement. This is more about the LRE. This is a description of parent rights. So, basically, you're going to have a heading, you're going to have information. This is a lot of words here too, but visuals, etc., frequently asked questions. So honestly, because this is a group work, group process, what you might do, since you're all in your assigned groups, is you might assign each person to do one component of the rubric. That's just an example of how you might do it. Or you might have someone who does the first half, the last half, etc. So this is what your working with parents looks like. Next one I'm going to talk about is, this is a student guide. So this is the group that has a student's guide to the IEP. This is all about the IEP for the students. So the last one was written specifically for parents. This one is written specifically for students. So in this one, it says, just keep swimming. This is a guide to my IEP, so it's obviously more student-oriented. And even in here it says this belongs to the date, so it's really making it personal. Again, this is just an example. You don't have to do that. What does an IEP mean for me? This group happened to use the Finding Nemo as a theme, so it looks like it's all throughout. And there's, what are all these different terms? What is an IEP? Why do I have an IEP? Real specific information there that would help a student. It's your IEP. These are student rights, what your rights are. So you'll notice, visuals, information, but you're not writing a textbook here. You're writing a manual. Here's help. Who can you go to for help? And then what can I expect at an IEP meeting? What will that look like? What are we going to talk about our IEP meeting? And what are some questions that I might have? And then here is where there's actually some workbook information for the student to actually do some of this work, which is also really helpful. A little bit more, what does my disability mean after I graduate, etc. So it really goes doodle page, and then of course there's always a citation page at the end of all of these. So this is the student example one. The next one is an example of, that was the elementary student. I forgot. We have an elementary student and we have a middle high school one. So obviously a younger one is going to look more like Nemo. High schoolers aren't going to want that. So here's your high school one. So this is, networking for a successful life. This has got a lot more of a feel to it. Here's the table of contents for this one. So it's, picturing what an IEP is, Snapchatting for help, watching what an IEP looks like, tweeting rights and responsibilities. So you see this one, it's got Instagram. This is definitely catered to the high school, middle school, mind, who's not going to want Nemo, but they're going to want to see how you can do different things using some of the tools that they really like. So there's Snapchat, Instagram. This is a picture of their teachers, who they can ask for help. So it's really very much written as a resource guide for middle school and high school students. Very much like the elementary one I just showed. And it's, again, making sure you address those rubric topics and finding a way to present it in a meaningful and fun and relevant way for that student. More Twitter. So what was really neat is they use Twitter to provide information. So they use different, so like right here it says, what's happening? If you feel as if you disagree with others' decisions, you have a right to speak up and ask questions and defend your opinions. It's your responsibility to check what your IEP entails. So the student rights are written as if they're a tweet. So again, this is creative. They did this on their own. You don't have to do that, and you don't have to do it because I gave it as an example, and it's not to say that you can't do it because I gave it as an example. But it's just here in a Tumblr. It's a blog about the information. So again, a student-friendly way to present IEP information that student will need to know as a middle schooler or high schooler who has an IEP. The next one we have here is our working with resistant educators. So this one's a little bit different. We've got working with resistant educators. You know what? I'm going to pause. I'm not going to do this one yet. Sorry. If that's you, fast forward to where I get to that. I want to do this one. I'm doing the major content first. This is an IEP for general education teachers. So now, same concept. We just looked at an IEP manual for families an IEP manual for elementary students and an IEP manual for high school or middle school students. This is an IEP manual for general education teachers. So if you are a general education teacher, this one is going to be really helpful for you, because this is where you provide information to other general education teachers about the IEP in a way that they will understand. So table of contents is here for you to look at. There's a Meet the Authors, which is an introduction of the students that completed this. IEP and components, IEP process, how do you contribute as a contributing member of the IEP team. So this is where you really answer those questions that most general education teachers don't know about the IEP. And the research shows that next to the student, unfortunately, the other person at the IEP meeting who knows the least about what their responsibilities are is the general education teacher. So this is almost like a little manual for that gen ed teacher to understand what an IEP is, how they can contribute as an IEP member, and any other relevant information that they need to have. So this is, they use sort of a theme of baking. So they talked about, you know, what goes in an IEP, what are the ingredients to an IEP, you know, things like, and then parent information is, as well as evaluation, implementation. So they used a little spin on that. What you need to do before the IEP meeting, what you need to do after the IEP meeting, information about the 13 categories of disabilities. Again, the topics that are in this are those that are listed in the rubric. So you will get your table of contents for your resource manual from actually looking through the rubric. So if you use that rubric as a guide, you're good to go. More information about IDEA. These are the principles of IDEA. So you'll see there is some overlap as far as what's in some versus the others. What happens when you find out you're going to have a student with a disability that you're unfamiliar with? What do you do? So any kinds of resources that you think would be valuable for general education teachers to know and learn more about the IEP manual. That's what the goal of this one is. The next three I have are working toward resistant educators, resistant staff, and resistant parents. Okay, and so resistant educators we'll start with. This is for basically a manual that is more for you instead of the actual person. So you're not going to hand this to a really difficult difficult gen ed teacher and say, hey, you're a pretty bad gen ed teacher and you're really resistant, you're really crappy actually, so here, read this. You're not going to do that. That's probably not going to work very well. This is a manual for you. So this is a manual that you write for other educators on how to deal with resistant people. So working with resistant educators, and that is where you're going to use some of the conflict resolution and prevention things that you're going to learn, that you learn in this class. And you're going to talk about, like, what is a resistant educator? Why might they be resistant? What are some things that can be caused or trigger people to be resistant? And then what are some strategies you can do to build relationships with resistant educators so they're not as resistant? And when we say resistant, I mean resistant to have students with disabilities in their classroom, or resistant to work with you and collaborate with you. But you know, basically someone who is difficult to work with when you're a special education teacher, or you're a teacher as a student with an IEP and you find this person to be extremely difficult. They work with the student, they need to learn to work with the student, but they're very resistant. So you have to have strategies on how to help them. So here's where, you know, this one talks about what does a resistant educator look like? And they go through all that. There's an angry person, we have angry people, we have stressed people, we have confused people or fearful people. If you have a student with a behavior challenge and they don't want them in their class because they're scared they're going to get hurt. We've got sad educators, withdrawn ones, blaming ones, the one that's always saying it's somebody else's fault. Withdrawn would be someone who really doesn't really do much or doesn't seem to care. And then unaccepting, you know, they're not really accepting of their role as someone who's going to have a student with a disability in their class. And then, you know, why might they be resistant? And what can you do to help them be less resistant? Strategies for building relationships. So, you know, communication should certainly be in there. Meetings, pamphlets, having information for them, workshops, trainings, and information about that, etc. And then activities for building relationships. So, how do you deal with that resistant educator, and then how do you avoid someone from being a resistant educator? How do you, help them, support them, make them feel like they should be and are a part of the team? What if I can't build a relationship? So there's all these different components to it. And so that is working with a resistant educator. And working with resistant staff is very similar, so I'm not going to go over that. And that is really looking at educators. Oh, this is the same thing. I was like, why? We don't have that other group. Same thing. I just have 2 examples of resistant staff because this class happened to have extra groups. So here's an example of this other resistant educator. They again went through different feelings, what makes someone resistant, what it looks like. They use Monsters, Inc. These people all tend to use themes. We're teachers, we like themes, but you don't have to. Why they might be resistant, all these things. So again, you're going to get your content based on your rubric. So use your rubric to make your content for your manual. Okay? And then you've got working with resistant parents. So sometimes, and you're learning this in this class as well, sometimes, unfortunately, we have parents who are resistant to partner with us. And, a lot of times it might be because they've had a bad experience in the past, or you've had an issue of disagreement amongst each other. But there are things you can do, and that's what this is for. So again, the Resistant Educators and Resistant Parents is a manual for you as an educator or for you to use with other educators. You're not going to hand this to a parent and be like, hey, you're kind of a pain in the butt. Read this. Not going to work. I was trying not to curse online. I think I didn't, but sometimes it keeps it fun. Anyway, again, here's your table of contents. Also built off of the the rubric. Introduction, what does a resistant parent look like? Resistant parent and the grief cycle. So it's important to talk about that family grief cycle that happens sometimes, not always. Why a parent might be resistant, how strategies for working with resistant parents, and then how can you build relationships and what can you build. So you want to have a little bit of a reactive and proactive. Reactive, if you already have someone who's resistant, how do you work with that? Proactive, how can you try to avoid having a resistant relationship? What can you do to build that partnership? So you'll use a lot of information that you have in this class already. So here we go. What is very similar to the educator? What does a resistant parent look like? Here's the different characteristics. Here's more about the grief cycle that we know, the research that's been done on the grief cycle, as well as why a parent might be resistant. What if I can't build relationships? What can I do? So again, notice there's very big spacing, pictures. Remember, if this was you getting this manual, would you read it if it was like single spaced, all these pages? I'm not concerned about the length. I'm concerned that you have content. As long as you've addressed the content that's in the rubric, my hair is doing some weird thing, then you should be good, okay? And so basically read through the rubric, look at the examples on this video, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions at all. I'm happy to set up meetings with your groups. I'm happy to do a phone call, Skype meeting. Again, this is an online class, so you're not required to come to campus, but if you are on campus and you want to meet in person, also happy to do that, more than happy to do that. So here is also, it's very important that you have references at the end, okay? So again, don't stress on this. I know it's a group work and sometimes that can be challenging. You'll notice on Canvas that I set up a group already for you that has an announcement availability as well as a discussion section, and I created a Google Doc for you already. So in that Google Doc, you can all write on it at the same time and start to put in your information. So my advice would be to take those content pieces from the rubric, stick them on that book, that Google page, and then start to see who wants to write what and who's going to contribute. And it is a group effort, so please make sure you're all contributing. Again, I'm here. I'm a member of all of your groups. That means I have access to your Google Drive, and I am very available to look things over for feedback, etc. Now, I will create another video, that is going to talk to you a little bit more about the presentation that comes along with your handbook. So first, focus on the handbook, and then you're going to be doing a brief 5 to 10 minute presentation either through a video like this or a narrated PowerPoint or something, and you're going to be basically introducing this to the entire class and making it available on YouTube so that students can watch it. And but again, I will do another video that goes over that in more detail and talk to you about some of the ideas that you might have or some ideas you might want to work with, and we'll go from there. I hope this was helpful. Again, I'm going to have these sitting at the front office in the School of Special Education in McKee Hall in office 29-ish, 29A, I think. It's in the basement of McKee. And feel free to go there and pick one up to look at. You can't take it because other people might want to look at it, but you are free to look at it while you're there. There's a little table there for you, and I am happy to answer any questions along the way. Okay, hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and I will see you in the discussion boards. Bye.